Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And now it's time for something special, my 25,000 subscriber Q&A. Again, I've gone before you guys a couple times before saying that I don't think I ever would have gotten to this point. I never expected it when I started. I assumed my channel would be kind of niche. And while I did dream that this channel might potentially blow up, I also had a healthy grain of perspective. This was never going to be a huge channel. The fact that we got 25,000 kind of blows my mind, if I'm being completely honest. And yeah, it's been a bit of a slower period to get from 20,000 to 25,000. But then again, the back half of 2016, there wasn't a lot of positive stuff, and I didn't have any of the same huge boosts as I had before, like thanks to Watch Mojo or big year-end list or huge reviews that grabbed everybody's attention, like with Blackstar. As a whole, that means that this has been a bit of a long time coming for me, but I'm happy we did get here. And to address one thing beforehand, I had actually planned something a lot bigger for this particular review. I was actually going to get together with a couple of friends and really put something special together, and it turns out the space that I was going to use wouldn't let me do it. And given how much equipment was regarded, it just wasn't going to come together. That being said, I am planning to do something special, maybe 30,000, maybe 40, maybe 50. We'll see. I'll try to figure it out. In the meantime, I would decide to take some questions from you guys, and let's see what happens. So, I'll start off. I am very strongly against memes. Do you support memes? I don't know. What is a meme in that context? What sort of meme has shaken your belief to believe in memes, to see the memes for what they are, all of those mimetic power that manages to transcend body, mind, and soul and crush your spirit down to the pathetic little fragment that it is right now, where you look up in grandeur at the memes that are suffocating you, and you ask where, from whence they came, and why, from whence, that I might speak to me. Okay, enough of that. I'm sorry. Truth of the matter is, I don't care. A lot of memes, I think, they have a place in modern culture to some extent. Like, they're pretty much being covered by mainstream news outlets at that point. Memes are effectively mainstream to a certain point. You're not getting the same element of dankness that emerged at 4chan, especially considering, well, what's happened in the United States over the past couple of years. Anyway, my overall point surrounding memes is that they're only as good as the people that support them and push them. And they're only as good as what they are trying to push behind them. And memes can be taken and recontextualized in so many different ways that means they can effectively mean anything. There are memes of me, which I find incredibly weird, but at the same time, they're also harmless. And I can't really see memes of me being recontextualized in a way that would prove dramatically offensive, mostly because I don't create all that much awkward and incredibly remixable content that be entirely mimetic. So no, not really against memes. They have their place, and let's just say they belong in a certain environment. Nothing more, nothing less. I think there's a larger conversation about memes in politics and social culture, but again, that's an entirely different can of worms. I'm saving up for a special comment. We might come back to this. Thoughts on the Beatles? Also, do you collect CDs/vinyl? Hi, Ethan. I'm glad to see you here. Thoughts on the Beatles? I think there are segments of their history that are wildly underrated and segments of their history that are wildly overrated. You can't deny what the Beatles did for music experimentation in the 1960s. You can't. But at the same time, the Beatles also fell into a very specific niche and point in pop culture that has been so frequently imitated without capturing the spirit of innovation that laid at their core. And I think that really did bother me a lot. Look, a lot of people love 60s rock and roll, but they love it for very different reasons, and it was really lionized by a lot of baby boomers to the point where then they had the backlash to all that, saying that the Beatles weren't really that good. In historical context, the Beatles really were quite excellent, but at the same time, there are elements of the Beatles' legacy that I don't put on the same pedestal that some people do. That being said, I still like the Beatles, I'll still appreciate a lot of the Beatles, but it's also placing them in that historical context that I have appreciated them both more and less, if that makes any sense. Now to the vinyl question. Now, as some of you might know, I recently started posting things on my Instagram account. Yes, apparently I now have an Instagram. I'm still not entirely certain how that all works, we'll come back to that, but I've started posting pictures of the vinyl that Voltor over here decides that he wants to order and go out and buy. I just can't stop him these days. He's gonna drain my bank account. Not a good scene. Anyway, what happened is that over about a couple months back, my folks said that, hey, we've got this turntable that we've had since 1978, 79. Do you want it? And I'm like, sure, okay, like, I would like to collect some vinyl, like, I'd like to get into the scene. I like the sound of vinyl that comes off of it. So they say, okay, we're gonna give you the turntable, mixer, and CD player. They're just collecting dust in our basement, so why don't you take a look at them? They also gave me all of their vinyl. So now I've got a stack of vinyl from like the late 60s to most of the 70s to even some of the early 80s that was collected by my mom and dad. And yeah, you got some really choice cuts there. I might bring them out and show them at some point, but that's a later concept entirely. So I'm starting to get into the concept of buying vinyl a little bit more. The whole setup process was more expensive than I would otherwise say, but hey, that happens. If you were to list your favorite songs from Hamilton, what would they be? I go back and forth on this all the time. I think probably still my favorite song is Wait For It. Just the flow and cadence of that song is so stellar. But the song I've really gotten into recently is The Room Where It Happens. I just love the immediate shifts and flips in the political jargon of that song. It goes so well. I love Yorktown. I love The History Has Its Eyes on You. I love Right Hand Man. There's a lot of some of the darker, more warlike songs I get into a lot. Then you have just the tear jerkers like It's Quiet Uptown. That just gets me. I don't like Burn as much as some people do. I guess I can appreciate that. And then there's a couple pieces I just think are a little abbreviated. They don't come together as well. But yeah, Hamilton's one of those things that I've gotten into a fair bit more, pretty much about a year late, but whatever, it's a good musical, you should check it out if you haven't. Which Little Mix song is better, Competition or Touch? I plead the fifth. Actually, let's be serious here. I probably like Touch more. It's because the chorus is a little bit better. The Competition can get a little bit jittery at points, doesn't always flow all that well. But I have to say this, if Little Mix ever did make a video for Competition, it probably would have turned out better than the video for Touch. I mean, what the hell happened there? It just looks ugly, and the color scheme, how flat it looks. Once again, all the more proof that Psycho Music has no proper idea how to market these girls anything worth a damn to the mainstream. That is so disappointing. What were some of the songs that just missed the cut for your favorite songs of 2016? Well, in no particular order.
Standing in the line of fire, I'll be right beside her. I'm her getaway driver, her getaway driver. In the distance there is truth which cuts like a knife. Maybe I will die, maybe tomorrow. So I need to say I adore life.
1, 2, 3, come on, you feel me. 1, 2, 3, come on, you feel me. 1, 2, 3, come on, you feel me. 1, 2, 3, come on. Remember the song. 1, 2, 3, come on, you feel me. Come on, you feel me. 1, 2, 3, come on, you feel me. 1, 2, 3, come on.
Gone here with my Dwayne Wayne looking ass. I want a stupid mic stand carved from a wooden staff. I'm trying to relive days that I couldn't grab. I looked up what Lena Dunham said and I shouldn't have.
Gabby told me we gon' blow like landmines. I don't fuck with Bert. That's the only reason Yams died. Nigga, I'm a goop. Hella Aki, that's the truth. But I bet you I could even keep it 10 times better than you. I'm a goop.
But my goody mob has some food for the soul. Till it's 2 in the morning when the rain hits the windshield. And everything is still. Nothing really is a big deal. One hand on the steering wheel, and we gon' be alright.
When every horse needs water and every weed needs sun, hail to the working man, my friend. He won't clock out till the end. When every saint and sinner's race is run.
I've been living in the fishbowl. Everybody looking, yeah. Looking at the
would be my list. It's an additional 10 songs, no particular order. Hope you guys enjoyed them. I want to try spicing this up a little bit more. All of these songs were very, very close to making the list, but just missed the cut at the very end. Hope you enjoyed it. Which review was harder for you to record, Black Star or Skeleton Tree? Black Star, easily. The death of David Bowie was very fresh in my mind when I recorded that review, especially in context with the album, which I've been listening to pretty much nonstop. It got under my skin in a way that I don't even think I was expecting when I got on camera and started talking about it. I knew it was gonna be sad. It was gonna be hard for me to talk about. I did not expect for it to hit me the way it did. Skeleton Tree, I had a little bit more distance, even though I absolutely adore the album, and it is a better record in my opinion, but Bowie's death was still so acutely fresh on that mind. It wasn't just the art that contributed to that conversation. It was also the societal impact. It was also the deeper weight of what Bowie made for me. In terms of the history, beyond just talking about the album, there was a greater weight there that really got to me. Have you ever lost everything you had for a video file before you had the chance to upload it? If so, what did you do? This has happened a number of times, although the most egregious is when John from ARTV, he and I actually shot a collaboration here in this apartment when he came up to visit me, and it turned out that I accidentally deleted the video and audio file before we could effectively put it all together. I'm hoping that I'll be able to talk to John or see John at some point in the near future, that we can collaborate a little bit more, and then we might be able to recreate it at some point, but as it is, man, that was disappointing. We really had something special there. And then it seems like, hell, for most of my collaborations, it seems like at one point or another, we're going to lose footage, or something will get messed up or scrambled. It's happened a number of times in the past. It just drives me crazy. But hey, let's hope for better luck in 2017. I've improved a lot of my setup, so I have the hopes things are going to get better. Have you ever felt bad for the massive dislike rate that you've gotten in some of your videos, like the Illuminate review? Not really. I'm disappointed more than anything. Like, I'd like to think that the dislikes were coming because I screwed up, or I said something that was offensive, or I actually went out and I did something that was outright wrong. The dislikes felt warranted and weren't just fan backlash. Hell, I've gotten fan backlash that's not just been applied to the videos, but have also cascaded down to Twitter or Instagram, where people actually filming videos responding to me. Or the people who get a little bit more ingenious decide to go and post negative reviews of my book, because that has happened in the past. There have been particular cases where I think the fan backlash has been a little undeserved. I still have no idea why so many people hated my 21 Pilots review of Vessel so much. I gave the album an 8 out of 10. It's a damn good record, but at the same time, it ties back into larger questions of fan culture that I probably will be revisiting at some point in the future, so stay tuned for that. In your opinion, what's the difference between a boring ballad and a beautiful one? Can you give an example of each? I think there's a couple elements that come in boring ballads that specifically tie into composition and the overall mood and atmosphere and what's trying to be said. When it comes to a boring ballad, let's take, I don't know, Lost Boy by Ruth B. Now, I didn't hate the song nearly as much as some critics did, but I would always consider it way too boring to get worked up about because there's no real stakes of that song. I don't feel like anything is being lost or compromised. The piano composition is bare bones and the delivery is flat as hell, does nothing for me. Now, in contrast, let's go to one of my go-to country ballads, She Don't Love You by Eric Posley from 2014. The song is drop dead gorgeous. There's a little bit more instrumentation, there's guitar, it's based off of primarily acoustic, and then it builds into a little bit more strings, a little bit more lush. And Eric Posley, he starts off subtle, but there's modulation. He grows in the song. He actually shows more delivery. And then the lyrical weight, my God, you can tell there's actual stakes to this song, that there has been love that has been lost, and there has been consequences that can't be fixed. You can't go back and change things in that song, Eric Posley, and that's what gives the song so much genuine heft and weight when talking about these people that are affected, possibly even permanently, by some of your actions. That actually has genuine weight going forward. That's what makes a great ballad, when you actually have that deeper sense of weight and time. And that's why typically a lot of my favorite ballads tend to come from older artists or have a little bit more experience with what they're talking about. So yeah, I think one of the big things when it comes to ballads, it's a sense of stakes, it's a sense of drama, it's a sense in the composition that there's modulation, and it's a sense that the lead singer is actually feeling something. He's not just removed and inert from the situation. As someone who greatly incorporates lyrics, themes, and framing into reviews, how do you approach instrumental music? I have to admit, I still struggle a lot with instrumental albums. It's one reason why, again, I don't tend to cover as much electronic music as I would otherwise like. Or, to flip it up into a different scenario, I don't tend to cover a lot of black metal or elements where I don't typically understand the main language. There's somebody who asked a question about K-pop. This falls into the same similar category. I like being able to understand what is being said on these songs. That whole concept of lyrics, framing, themes, that's a big element of analysis when it comes to my reviews. You know, you can still get some of those questions with regards to framing and emotional dynamics that comes in instrumental pieces, but it's much more subjective, it's much more hazy, and it's hard for me to make as many definitive statements when I'm reviewing those albums. I still want to get into that more, that make me a better critic overall, that I'm able to analyze and encapsulate that emotion and describe it, but again, I'll admit, I got a long way to go. How come artists like Celine Dion and Bryan Adams get so much hate, even from Canadians? Okay, here's the thing with this. I don't hate Bryan Adams. Hell, I don't even hate Celine Dion. And I think the thing that you guys all need to contextualize here is that these bands, we might hate them on the internet, or we might show a profound amount of dislike towards them, but the mainstream population just does not care. There's a reason why Celine Dion has sold millions of records. She appeals to her audience extremely well. And let me stress that when she does have broader appeal, she can pull it off masterfully. When she's worked with Jim Steinman in the past on songs like It's All Coming Back to Me, that song is beautiful. I genuinely love that track. Now, to circle back, they tend to get a lot of hate because they appeal to that larger silent majority audience. They're not appealing to the sort of music critics because they don't need to in the same way. And yeah, sure, it drives me off the wall. They aren't trying to improve artistically in the same way. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Just so you can look back some of their output for several years in some cases. You can see how much they're not improving. But a lot of easy listening music never felt the obligation to even try. And that's what bothered me primarily the most. And it's probably what bothers a lot of people. Say, take Nickelback. Nickelback has never cared what critics like me say about them. They just care that the fact that they sell out concerts consistently around the world. And hey, like, as much as we might not like them, and again, they are not as bad as some other bands that I could mention, but hey, like, at the end of the day, what can I say that's going to impact how much somebody's going to like or dislike a Nickelback album, especially somebody who's not going to be interested in listening to a critic in the first place? Only so much I can do here. What song or album from your childhood do you come back to after all these years?
Baby, show me what it's all about.
Oh yeah, I gotta love this song. Just 1997 encapsulated perfectly. Such a fantastic pop tune. Absolutely love it. It's gold. Out of all the trends in modern country music, which is the worst? Like example, bro country. Drum machines in country music. I don't know when this became a thing. Like, it started off a little bit before bro country. You'd see it start creeping into some pop country stuff, but I can't stand it. There are plenty of working drummers who can play extraordinarily well, and you're gonna bring them on live anyway when you go touring. Why do you feel the need in the studio to incorporate so much syncopated drum progressions that feel so fake and so phony, and they're so rarely blended well? It baffles the mind why anyone thinks that this sounds good. It makes so much of this feel so stiff, especially when you compare it to elements in country that was always intended to accentuate the flow and the groove, like the steel guitar, like the fiddles. The drum machines, they just don't fit in that regard, and I don't understand why they keep showing up. You like to think that country's pivot back towards more of a indie or neo-traditional sound might get rid of some of them, but hey, you never know. Not many rock songs chart anymore. Why do you think that is? In a word, a lot of rock doesn't get airplay anymore, and it doesn't tend to get a lot of streaming anymore. Outside of very specific bands that cultivate that online fan base, and the younger fan base specifically, to go out and stream, to go out and listen to music outside of that concept, that a lot of rock believes in buying albums and rock radio airplay. I hate to say it, but a lot of rock radio airplay is not crossing over the same way anymore. And yeah, it drives me crazy. I want to hear more rock music. Even in Canada, where we hear a fair amount of it, it's not as ubiquitous as it was in, say, the 80s or the 90s, where I'd argue that there was a fair amount of good rock music that you could at least have the option to hear. But nowadays, You're not getting the same way, and I wish we did. But for an answer to that question, how do you think new metal and / or post-grunge can be improved or made better than a lot of bands in those genres? In a word, melodies. Hooks, being able to draw forth a progression that actually sticks in the memory. I've gone back and I've listened to a lot of rock radio as of recently in preparation for some of my upcoming reviews. And you know what I gotta say? It's not that a lot of this music is bad, but I don't remember it. I don't. What sticks in your brain is melody, it's composition. The chugging gent trend that a lot of bands have popularized, especially in certain parts of heavy metal, I think it's done a tremendous disservice to a lot of rock music being taken in by the mainstream population. I get why people like that sound. If you want to get on board with the chugging riffs and that particular more abrasive, sharp-edged attempt at sound, go ahead. It's not accessible, but it's not trying to be. That's fine. But you can't have it both ways then and say, well, why isn't rock getting radio play? Because it's not trying to get radio play. If rock wanted to try and get a lot of radio play, you would build melodies, you build tremendous hooks. Think back to the truly great rock songs in any genre, new metal or post-grunge, even though I can't really cite a lot of great new metal songs off the top of my head, it's not my genre. But post-grunge, for instance. I think back to like a great song like Everlong by the Foo Fighters. Absolutely love that song. But the key thing is, there is a melody that is in that main guitar line that you will remember alongside of the smokier, more abrasive grooves that go with it. And that's the key thing. When I look at a lot of modern rock radio, the stuff that crosses over is often either so weak and so timid that the melody comes through because it's not going to get that heavier level of abrasion, or you get rock that is so thunderous and chunky that it doesn't have that same melodic progression that sticks in your main guitar line. That's one reason why I think Baroness and what they're doing with their primary lead guitars that actually have a little bit more primacy in the mix, that's often very encouraging. I like how big Shock Me has gotten. I'm really surprised it got nominated for a Grammy, but it's on the right track there. I think that rock will start to pivot and become a little bit more relevant in the mainstream coming up soon. We'll talk more about this later, but I think the overall questions surrounding that will be if they are willing to embrace more melodies going forward. Because if they are, hey, it's gotta hope. You gotta think so. Any thoughts on how big companies like Pitchfork are taking over much of today's music criticism? I don't think they are. Yeah, I'm going to say this right now. If you go back and take a look at viewership numbers, you take a look at the readership when it comes to Pitchfork, when it comes to a lot of the bigger companies in the whole scene, yeah, let's ask the question. While I've said in the past that there are some people in those bigger scenes where a lot of the mainstream public considers them relevant, you're seeing a lot more and more these days, a lot more of the critic as personality sort of approach to music journalism. Look how big Anthony Fantano's gotten. Hi, Anthony, if you ever happen to watch this. Comes down to you seeing a lot more of these guys who become popular, but it's based on their personality. It's not based upon the weight of an institution behind it. And I think a large part of that is that the degradation of those institutions, you see that coming through in a lot of clickbait journalism, that you would normally expect these institutions to hold themselves to a higher standard, and yet it's independent freelance journalists or people on YouTube that are taking up a lot of the slack there. So I don't see those big companies being as dominant in the same way. If anything, what I'm seeing is reviewing outlets such as Pitchfork being bought out by bigger companies that are looking to push them in a more accessible mainstream direction. Let's get real here. While there's been a lot of contentious reviews that have come out of Pitchfork, I tend to think that there's a number of reviews that have been more overtly positive towards popular artists than you would otherwise expect. And they would not have happened in the same way if you go back a decade or so from those particular institutions. Now, am I saying that Condé Nast is putting pressure on them to include more artists that the mainstream would recognize and thus draw more traffic to those sites? I don't know. It's something to consider there. But it's one of those things that you need to consider when you look broadly at the larger institutions that are governing music journalism, because I'm seeing a lot of them devolving to clickbait, and I'm also seeing a lot of people getting kind of sick of it, and a lot more music fans pivoting towards a greater preponderance of singular music critics speaking their mind. And those of us who are able to foster a strong, consistent platform, I can see us doing well in the future. And that actually does give me a fair amount of hope. But again, that's all on you. So if you guys are placing a lot of weight in those institutions, well, you're giving them that weight. You're allowing them to get away with it. Do you have any idea why Doomtree albums are barely covered by YouTube reviewers, or in general? Oh god, this is one of those larger questions when it comes to indie music and comes to promotion. To be blunt, Doomtree are are kind of punk in their aesthetic. They do everything in-house. They don't really coordinate with larger mainstream labels. Otherwise, I could see them actually having a chance of charting if they were properly marketed in that direction, but they aren't trying for that. They are very much a cult act. I love them as a cult act. I wish they could be a lot bigger. Hell, everybody I have shown them to likes them. Why aren't more critics talking about them? Because critics talk about what gets big. A lot of critics, they talk about stuff that fits within their wheelhouse so that they want to talk about. And on YouTube, well, the Daily Guru used to talk about Doomtree fairly regularly. Me and Mike Seatown both do it. The only critic I'm surprised who doesn't talk about Doomtree more is Anthony Fantano, because it does kind of seem up in his wheelhouse, given more experimental, rough-edge hip-hop. But given that he's come out as not a huge POS fan, then I'm not entirely surprised if he has shunted most of the group into that category. But again, why don't you ask him? I'm not sort of the guy who could otherwise speak to that. When Doomtree drops new projects, I'm going to be talking about them. So, hey, make of that what you will. What are your celebrity crushes? You see, I could do a whole Dreamweaver sort of montage here, but I'm going to tell you some stories. See, back when I was growing up, like around 14, 15, my big first celebrity crush was Hilary Duff, believe it or not. I just thought she was so cute. I watched the Lizzie McGuire show consistently. I actually even went to one of her concerts. I actually have a Hilary Duff CD too, and there was a part of me that had this little abstract wish that she'd see me in the crowd, she'd have me like pull me up on stage and we'd sing together and stuff like that. Anyway, I was like 15, 16. I was a hormonal teenager. She was unbelievably hot. Moving beyond that, Hilary Duff was a big one. Keira Knightley was a big one. A little bit Kesha, although it was more from a preponderance of admiration of the music that she was trying to make. In terms of other celebrity crushes, I think Alicia Keys is hot as hell, but I don't really have celebrity crushes in the same way. Like, once you get to a certain age, you kind of move past it in a certain way. You can say that, yes, they are unbelievably attractive. Yes, they make amazing music, which makes them even more attractive, but at the same time, you also have to have a speck of realism. It's not like I'm ever going to have a chance to meet any of these people and potentially do anything. It's just being real with yourself here. As much as it is a fantasy, that's all it's ever gonna be. Have you ever considered doing a tour of your apartment, house, I don't know? Oh, geez. I've said this before, and I always said when I started on my Instagram, it's like, I don't understand Instagram because I don't consider my life all that interesting. I see people asking, hey, what do you do? Like, what is your other things outside of your music interests and the stuff you do beyond videos? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, partially I'm kind of private. I don't like talking about a lot of that sort of thing. I don't have anything to hide, but I don't see how it's anybody else's business. And one thing I've also noted is that I've seen a lot of people who do share a lot, like everything online, and that has led to some things backfiring, especially when you start accumulating an audience. I think it shows a little bit of irresponsibility when you start putting out public information stuff that really should remain private, and not having a concept around that privacy can be kind of damaging, especially when there's a large number of people who will misconstrue what you're going to say. Like, for example, I've been watching a lot of vloggers, a lot of stuff outside of my music review stuff on YouTube. I watch pretty much everything. I've watched everything from music videos to gamers to beauty gurus. Shut up, I've got reasons. And then coming back, I've actually been watching a lot of vloggers recently. So you're seeing Joey Graceffa, and you're watching Shane Dawson, and you're watching The Gabby Show, actually. I've watched a bunch of her stuff. But then going beyond that, I also started watching Onision. And I've watched Onision for a while now. But when you take a look at a lot of the drama that has percolated out of his channel, and I can see a lot of the stuff that he's saying, like, he's not lying. He's got a logical proof behind a lot of what he says, but at the same time, it's one of those cases where I'm shaking my head and I'm like, you know, this doesn't frame you and make you look good, right, to a mainstream public. Sure, I might get where you're coming from. It's a question of what you're showing, and it's a question whether or not the larger mainstream audience needs to know it. You're not being secretive, it's just showing questions that, do they really need to know? And that's the sort of thing, like, I can see why people are like, give yourself a house, give yourself an apartment tour. I'm like, do people really need or want to know what is inside my apartment? Like, I'm on Instagram. I'm going to use to take pictures of albums that Voltorb might otherwise pick up. But at the same time, like, does anyone want to see what I eat for breakfast or lunch or dinner? Does anybody want to see the details of my apartment? Like, does anyone want to know who I might or might not be seeing, or my friend circle and stuff like that? There needs to be a distinctive separation between my YouTube life and the rest of my life. And I think that key element of separation is important. That's why I don't tend to talk a lot about my otherwise job, and I don't talk about YouTube at work, and there's a very good reason for that. I understand you guys wanting to see more about me. I understand the curiosity, and I appreciate the curiosity. It's honestly a little amazing that you guys think that my life is interesting. I have to say that. But at the same time, it's also the sort of thing where when I show something, there will be for a reason. If I invite anybody else on the channel, it will be for a time and place and reason. You don't know how long it took me to even start the Patreon. It was something I thought about for a good year and a half. It turned into the sort of smash success that I never could have possibly expected. And I have to thank all you guys for getting involved. And I will have a link in the description whether or not more of you guys want to get involved in that scheduling process. It's been a ton of fun and I'm really grateful for it. But at the same time, it's also one of those cases where it was exposing myself to an element of outside of my comfort zone and privacy that I wasn't entirely comfortable with until that point. And sure, it was a huge success, but I never would have expected. So as to whether or not you guys want me to do an apartment tour or to start showing more of my life outside of that, I might not, because I've also seen with a lot of those vloggers, to circle back, the consequences of showing too much or constantly filming vlogs and showing that other side of your life to the point where it is so draining, especially the way that YouTube has shifted their algorithm when they expect your entire life to be on camera and you don't have a massive backing support of production staff or editors, which I don't, because again, I still work a full-time job. It means that people just burn out. And I've seen that. I feel incredibly bad for some of those vloggers who work their ass off and they'll still just get bored or frustrated or creatively stifled and they just burn out so quickly. And you know, you have to hope that YouTube at some point will adopt a model that will be able to better support those people in their creative passions without causing their numbers to crash and burn out. But hey, that's a larger question entirely. And as it is, circling back to the apartment tour, if you ever see it, it'll be because I want you to see it or because there is a reason that you're seeing it. That's all. And finally, how might we expect the current political climate to manifest itself in music aiming for the charts? What about the underground? There's going to be no way around this for the next couple of years. A lot of people are saying that music in and of itself throughout the creation in the underground and the charts will be impacted by the rising of authoritarian regimes around the world. And it's hard not to see some of that already happening. Now, granted, a lot of the protest music that was released last year was terrible. It was really, really freaking bad. But at the same time, we're also starting to see a recurrence and a revival of more of the emo scene. The undercurrents of punk and pop punk in the underground are starting to percolate a little bit more. I had been predicting that rock will make more of a comeback, and you're seeing more and more of it all the time. Slightly more abrasive music coming forward. You're getting more political hip-hop that, sure, it's not getting played on the radio, but artists who are old legends or some of the artists that are some of the biggest in the genre are making powerful political statements. That is coming back to the forefront. Now, whether or not it's going to impact the charts, I think a lot of political artists have lost the art of making political anthems that can be as catchy and relevant in the same way that can be played on modern pop radio, that it can actually fit that environment. A lot of times they don't care. And sure, I can admire that because I'll still listen to them outside of it, but at the same time, you're not going to galvanize the population in the same way. Certain political songs, they might get popular, but take a case like Same Love. That was primed at the same time as a cultural shift. That was a 1 in a million sort of thing. Now, as to whether or not this is going to happen based upon the current political climate, because let's keep in mind, I'm not going to refer to what's happening in the States because that's only going to get more unsettled and turbulent, but it's also happening in the UK. It's happening across Europe. There's a very big possibility it could happen again in Canada. And I say again because it wasn't like our Prime Minister before Justin Trudeau wasn't a paranoid authoritarian. Look at some of the stuff he did with regards to climate science and his own press gallery shenanigans. This has happened before, and we came out of it, but it's not like it can't happen again. But I say this when it impacts art as a whole. I think that you're going to get some powerful art that's going to try to make a statement. I think there's going to be some art that will try to make a statement and fail spectacularly. You saw a lot of it last year. I think that there's going to be a very sharp divide, not just between conservative and liberal, but also between authoritarian and libertarian, and not the extremes that you see with the world. so, but the broader based concept, whether or not you feel that there's a greater focus towards freedom and preponderance or the authority of the state. That's why when you take a look at a lot of what's happening across the world when it comes to authoritarian regimes, they might embrace concepts from both the left and the right, but it's all about concentrating that power in that established state and that established system, not in the individual. I'm seeing a lot more people inclined towards the individual who really do need to speak out more. And I think a lot of people ended up getting duped and brought along with the authoritarian regime because they need something to look to. It's going to be interesting to see how art effectively responds to this, because this is going to be an issue for both left and right. I think an issue probably more for the left because the left has such a bad reputation of tearing itself to shreds over these sort of topics. It's one reason why I've always said that the most recent album from White Lum is the feminist album that a lot of feminists don't want to see, or they don't want to hear, because it actually speaks to feminism outside of a more critical point of view. It takes feminist subject matter and then places it against in a more libertarian framework, speaking more for the rights of the individual, which, yes, should be preserved and will come more under attack as things will go. And as such, I can see if music starts being able to promulgate in that direction, being able to empower the elements of the individual to ask those tougher questions and be able to speak and unify in the right purposes to enact societal change, sure, it can happen. I don't see it happening because I see a lot of artists being able to fall back onto what works and not trying. You saw a lot of that in 2016. A lot of artists not trying. And a lot of it got big because they were able to coast on celebrity. And thus, when they were expecting to make those big political statements, the ones that did, they hadn't actually gone that far outside of their comfort zone in order to more deeply inspire people, in order to ask those more complicated questions. And now it doesn't help when you also have to keep in mind that there were forces outside of just art and culture that inspired those changes. You have to consider economics. You have to consider polarizations when it comes to race and media and gender. And I'd like to hope with this channel that I'll be able to address some of those questions, how as they refer to the art that I will cover. I'm not going to lie. There might be a little bit more political content on this show when it comes to special comments, when it comes to how it's framed. But I also want to stress that, again, I'm slightly insulated from this. I'm in a position of security from where I'm speaking from. I'm also in a country that's not currently under an authoritarian leader who would otherwise break down the door with a SWAT team and haul me off to a secret gulag. But that being said, it also requires that that we do our due diligence, that we work harder, that we speak out more effectively when we see blatant oppression or blatant lies or people blatantly trying to mislead the public, because yeah, that is going to happen. I will be endeavoring to speak truth to stupid as much as I can. You need to be able to see things not just in the broad black and white strokes. And yet, when you have certain authoritarian regimes that love to define themselves in black and white strokes, but then will promulgate and say things that are outside of that black and white, or will flip around black and white, or will increasingly muddy the waters so you can't tell what is black and what is white, that's where things get a little bit more complex. That's why we have to be more conscious of it. That's why we have to break outside of our bubbles. That's why we have to listen to people and actually talk to people. A lot of people seal themselves away in their hermetic state, but there's a reason I follow Red State and David Frum on Twitter. There's a reason why I read as much of their stuff as I do Vox, or the Washington Post, or the New York Times. There's a reason I try to take in as much as I possibly can, and then place an appropriate economic concept and place it in that additional political concept. But circling back to art, circling back to all this, you're going to see a lot of that additional changes. I don't see a lot of it impacting the charts. And all do want to see, I don't see a lot of it happening immediately, because I think there's a lot of people who have insulation from it now. Now, the good news is that given that it's so easy to release music these days, and so easy to put a lot of that stuff out there and reach the masses instantly, independently, I think you're going to see more of that come out and see more of it gain an audience in the right spots. But again, you got to be careful. You got to look for that complexity. You got to look for that nuance, and you got to be willing to call people on their shit. That's why I'm so grateful for you guys. To circle back to this being 25,000, there's 25,000 of you who can call me on my shit. That blows my mind, man. Like, that is just incredible. There are people who have made YouTube poops of me. There's fan accounts for me. There's fan fiction of me. Yeah, that blew my mind. That was an afternoon of adventures. So for 2017, I'm looking forward to collaborating with more people, working with more people, expanding outside of my comfort zone a little bit more. I'm very happy how much the Patreon has pulled forward a lot of different viewpoints that I never would have otherwise expected. But again, it's going to be a question to see where all that goes and how much I'll be able to follow through on it. I've already done a lot of improvements and changes to my setup. I'm hopefully going to be able to get a real legit teleprompter this time. But keep in mind, all this is without a script. And again, I have to say, thank you all so much for this. I'm not at the point where I'm doing this as my full-time job yet, but I'm getting there, and I'm getting there faster than I could have expected. I don't think this channel will ever be viral. I don't think it'll ever be huge. I don't see it ever being as big as like Anthony or Deadhead Hip Hop or Buckley or Todd or Rap Critic or those guys. But hey, you gotta hope. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.